When we think about how politics works, we usually picture the big moments, right? The dramatic speeches, the nail-biter votes. But what if I told you that's not where the real action is? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the hidden mechanics of a place like Parliament, the small, almost boring stuff that secretly controls everything. Let's get into it.
In this idea right here, this is our jumping off point. We are all trained to look for that one big switch, the single obvious solution that's going to fix a huge, complex problem. But what if we're looking in completely the wrong place? What if the real power to change things is hidden in the quiet, less obvious parts of the system?
So, here's the plan. We're going to start by totally busting the big switch myth. Then, we'll dive into 3 really key mechanics: the constant pressure of time, what we call the system's memory, and the timing of scrutiny. Then, we'll see how it all connects, and we'll finish up with the next big question this whole perspective raises.
All right, first things first, we have got to talk about this big switch myth. It really comes down to a simple question. Where do we focus our attention? Instead of getting caught up in all the political theater, we're going to look at the surprisingly powerful, everyday nuts and bolts of the system.
Okay, so look at this. This really gets to the heart of it. On the left, you've got the stuff that grabs all the headlines, the big speeches, the dramatic failures, the major new laws. But on the right, that's where the real drivers of behavior are. Things like calendars, how long people actually stay in their jobs, and even just when questions get asked. It's the boring stuff that actually shapes everything.
So, let's dive into our first mechanic, the pressure of time. You probably think of time as, just this neutral container that stuff happens in. But it's not. It's actually an incredibly active force that pushes and pulls and shapes every single decision that gets made.
And what does that pressure actually feel like? Well, it's not some sudden explosion. It's more like a slow, creeping flood. Work just keeps stacking up. Issues get pushed to the side, and big problems get a quick patch just to make it through the day.
And once that work starts piling up, the next step is inevitable. Time itself gets squeezed. All the space you'd want for careful thought, for real deliberation, it just vanishes, and it gets replaced by this frantic rush to just get things done.
So what's the result? The system has no choice. It starts taking shortcuts. It begins to value momentum and visibility, just looking busy, over careful consideration. Not because that's the best way to do things, but because it's the only way to survive the daily chaos.
And this is exactly why time is such a powerful incentive. See, when all the really tough questions and scrutiny are piled up at the very end of a process, every decision leading up to that point is made in the shadow of that big final fight. But what if you just spread the work out? You create these pauses, these moments for reflection, the pressure eases up, and suddenly totally different and often better choices become possible.
Okay, so that brings us to our next piece of the puzzle, the system's memory. We hear all the time that fresh eyes are a great thing, right? But what about the hidden cost, when people are constantly coming and going, especially when that turnover is fueled by the same intense time pressure we were just talking about?
And this captures that trade-off perfectly. On one side, sure, you get new energy, but on the other, you have a system that literally forgets things faster than it learns them. It's stuck relearning the same mistakes from scratch. That frantic pace leads to burnout, so people leave their jobs right when they're finally starting to get a handle on the real problems, and all that hard-won knowledge just walks right out the door with them.
This is what we're talking about when we say institutional memory. And look, this isn't about being stuck in the past or being resistant to change. It's about being effective right now. It is the collective wisdom that allows a whole system to actually learn and adapt. If you don't have it, you're basically doomed to make the same mistakes over and over again.
Okay, on to our third and final mechanic, scrutiny. And here's the secret. It's not about who shouts the loudest. The key takeaway is that when the scrutiny happens is way more important than how loudly it happens. This shows you the two types side by side. On the left, you have that loud, late scrutiny. By that point, the options have narrowed, everyone's positions have hardened, and changing your mind looks like you're losing. It's just political theater. But on the right, you have quiet, early scrutiny. Here, there's still room to actually explore ideas, to look at trade-offs. It's not framed as a big win or a big loss, so it's so much easier for someone to say, you know what, this might not work. It's a totally different way of solving problems. So we've looked at time, we've looked at memory, and we've looked at scrutiny. But the real magic, the real insight, happens when you finally see how they all connect and feed off each other. This isn't just a list of 3 separate things. It's a living, self-reinforcing system. And this is how it all fits together, like a set of gears.
When you start by distributing time more evenly, you create the space for that quiet, early scrutiny to happen. And that scrutiny is then guided by a strong institutional memory, because people have actually been around long enough to remember what worked last time and what didn't. And all of that, together, leads to better choices. It is a powerful, positive feedback loop.
And please, if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. It is not about having a checklist of reforms. It's about alignment. It's about making sure the small, boring mechanics of the system are actually working with its big goals, not against them. It's about creating an environment where a system's best instincts can actually flourish instead of being crushed.
Once you start thinking this way, it opens up a whole new set of questions. If the internal mechanics of a system are so important, what happens when you start moving important work outside of that system, outside of Parliament?
This is where the idea of delegation comes in. The thought is, why not create these separate, arm's-length bodies to handle really complex, long-term issues? On the surface, it seems like a pretty smart way to deal with that intense pressure we talked about, right? To create a space for deeper thinking away from the daily political grind.
And that brings us to our final and I think crucial question. Are moves like delegation a real, genuine solution for long-term stability? Or are they just a temporary pressure valve? A way to kick the can down the road that leaves all those underlying mechanical problems of time and memory and scrutiny completely untouched, just hidden from view for a little while? That's the question we'll leave you with.